is not there, so the aid money or whatever it is, humanitarian, it is very highly likely to go to their hands. And there is no report. There was one budget that the Taliban in the very early days, because they wanted to secure the international recognition, they put something on. And I had a conversation with the very senior officials from the Ministry of Finance, who is now in exile. And he said that Mullah Hibatullah is saying no more budget. Because if we do the budget, then we kind of allocating resources to different sectors. And by allocation of aid money to different sectors, our central control of the money will disappear. So he's still going into, and if you see this new report by the World Bank of the $2 billion, or totally for the past 2 years, nearly 3 billion of UN cash shipment was made to the Taliban. So, and the kind of the budget and the kind of revenue that the Taliban have been generating, 50% of that is spent on security. So what does that mean? So I don't remember figures at the top of my head, but I think it is Ministry of Interior. According to some resources, they have 161,000 troops. Michael perhaps have more information about that. What they do with the 161,000, perhaps this is very paradoxical, maybe do not have that many troops, but forget about the Ministry of Defense. So all the money is not going to the developmental purposes, it's going for the security or whatever money is being generated from whatever. And I also heard that Mullah Hibatullah has his own off-budget flow of aid from other countries, which we don't know. And that's why the 5% of the developmental that they spend on based on the World Bank report. So for instance, you see Poshtepa. For instance, you see the Salang Tunnel. So where this money comes in? Not from the budget. It is from the بکس علبی داره مثل که مولا عمر در وقتش یک صندوق مملو از پول نقد داشت یک پارچه میته میگه برو این قبرازی بده از طرف امیر صاحب از طرف خلیفه صاحب. So that sort of thing is still there.
ما میخوایم در ادامه صحبت‌های شما یک نقل قول از آقای جانزبکو را همینجا بخوانم براتون. گفته است که من میزان مداخله طالبان در روند توزیع کمک‌های بشری و ناتوانی سازمان ملل در حفاظت از برنامه‌های این سازمان در افغانستان را نگران کننده میدانم. یعنی واقعا اینجا نگرانی کننده وجود دارد. من فکر میکنم چند موضوع را باید مشخص در موردش صحبت شود. یکی اول این که هیچ کدام ما نمیخوایم که کشور ما مورد تحریم قرار بگیره، درست؟ بدون شک بسیار تاثیر عمیق داره، نه که بر سر مردم که در داخل افغانستان فعلا در یک محرومیت بسیار شدید زندگی میکنن، بلکه برای آینده کشور ما بسیار وحشتناک است. ولی حرف ما در کجاست؟ وقتی ما میخواییم که شفافیت از سازمان ملل یا از دیگر نهادهایی که مسئولیت دارن کمک برسانن به مردم افغانستان، است که بر ما مشخص کنن که طالبان کمک هایی را که دریافت میکنن از اون مدرسه جهادی نمیسازه که متاسفانه هر روز بیشتر شده میرن. حالا بیشتر از 3000 مدرسه جهادی در سراسر افغانستان تأسیس شده، حتی در دورترین نقاط افغانستان، جاهایی که طالبان مکاتب دختران را، مکاتب پسران را آتش زدن، تخریب کردن، ولی حالا مدرسه جهادی در اونجا ساخته میشه. و این پول هاست کجا میره؟ طالبان بسیار مردمان هوشیار هستن، اونا سرمایه گذاری میکنن روی ادامه ایدئولوژی خود در افغانستان و یک چطوری نسل بعدی را با نیمی ایدئولوژیشون مطابق بسازن. موضوع دومی است که سازمان ملل یا تمام نهادهایی که صحبت میکنه حداقل گزارش ماهوار برای از اینکه مردم افغانستان مطمئن شوند که واقعا اینمی کمک ها بر ما میرسه و زندگی ما از اینمی کمک ها متاثر میشه یا کم ذره وضعیت ما بهتر میشه، بهبود پیدا میکنه، مطمئن شوند. ولی متاسفانه اون چیزی نیست. مثلا نهادها هست، رسانه ها هست، رسانه ها اکثریت خبرنگاران در داخل افغانستان اونا که آزادانه فعالیت نمیتونن. مثلا وکیل گذر که در هر ناحیه، مثلا اگر شهر کابل رو در نظر بگیریم، در هر ناحیه کسی است که مسئول است که فامیلای بی بضاعت را، خانواده ها یا زنان بی سرپرست را شناسایی کنن. ولی در اینمی پروسه خودش یک کلان فساد وجود داره. زنانی که بالاخره سرپرست خانوادهشان را در جریان این جنگ 20 سال در افغانستان از دست دادن، اونا دیگه اجازه ندارن که حتی با نومی وکیل گذری که از طرف طالبا مکلف شده که اونا رو شناسایی کنه برای اونا تماس بگیرن. و این واقعا وحشتناک است. این دسترسی گروه های آسیب پذیر به نهادهایی که کمک میکنن یا نهادهایی که کمک ها رو نظارت میکنن بسیار محدود است. شما درست، ما مثلا یک گزارش داشتیم از اینکه چطوری مواد بسیار گندیده شده را به مردم توزیع کرده بود و متاسفانه این روند همیشه جریان داشته. در طول 20 سال هم موجود داشته کمک هایی که تحت نام مردم افغانستان به افغانستان میره، ولی مردم اکثر اوقات از اون مستفید نمیشه. خیلی وحشتناک است. تشکر.
تشکر بسیار زیاد زهرا جان. خب ما اگر کس سوال داره در آدینس میتونیم سوالا را بگیریم. بله آقای شرانی بفرمایید. شرانی.
Thank you for the presentations. The assumptions seem to be that the West truly what it says, what it does, what it says is its intention. That is, the world has been subjected to trillions of dollars of aid, so-called aid, from the post-World War II till now. The situation in Gaza that we have just witnessed has been receiving aid for 75 years to stay in a prison that the West has been supporting. Is it really appropriate to call this aid or assistance? Or is it, as anthropologists have been writing for many years, it's the humanitarian war that is part of the hot war. We are, in fact, assuming and believing that the West is telling us the truth, that they are, in fact, aiding, but it is, in fact, part of their war. A two-pronged war. In Afghanistan, America spent $2 trillion in fighting a hot war. $2 trillion. And 80-something billion dollars in so-called assistance, which was mostly stolen. So dollar is a weapon, just like rocket is a weapon. And furthermore, America is being defeated in Afghanistan. Is it truly the thing that they have shame and they have guilt and they do all of this because of their guilt and shame? Why a defeated country continues to pay the enemy that has lost $40 million a week? It doesn't make any sense. We really have to rethink the intentions and what's being said and what's being done and what its consequences are. This forum is on assistance. It's not on assistance, it's on humanitarian war. And if you conceptualize it as a form of war, you might come up with very different conclusions. Why do we have to accept the narrative that the West has been presenting us all the time, uncritically? It is time we need to think a bit more critically and see whether there is any difference between the hot war of dropping bombs and also dropping money.
Can we have
to
a
the
question,
enemy
please?
as such. Question is to everybody that I would like you to, is it possible to rethink what you were just discussing, or we should stay on that narrative for good?
In terms of rethinking, I think, just to be very brief, I think that to try to be fair, I think we must recognize the shortcomings of the existing aid policy, which everybody has discussed, and the question that you, Professor Sharani, have pointed to. But I think it's difficult to judge intent. Unfortunately, the conspiratorial mindset dominant in Afghanistan is based on the fact that we've been victims of such policy for the past 4 decades. So even the best of intentions when it comes to aid, when it has these qualities where it's blind doling out of millions of dollars, triggers such questioning. Whether or not it's possible to rethink the narrative, I think the question should be asked, if the question is asked to citizens of Afghanistan, I think the citizens of Afghanistan have almost given up. The level of desperation and the level of dependency on this aid is beyond the collective capability to try to have any independent position. And that is the sad reality. In the 20 years of the Republic, people acted like there was a higher level of independent thinking. Now we know that that level of dependence was far less than we initially thought. Difficult conversations were not held before. If this question, the question of rethinking, was seriously taken into account between policymakers and decision makers in the past 20 years, it might have prevented the collapse, because it might have allowed for more courageous and bold decision making, forcing a more equal and more fair relationship with donors. Now, the last thing I'll say, not to drag this further, is to a point that Dr. Sebashmi pointed to. If the intent of aid is to perpetuate dependency, we have to look at the Taliban as a group. There are what we hear from the aid community is, oh, if the Taliban governance is dependent on this aid, we can alter behavior, we can change policy. Because if we then, after a few years, put a condition that we will reduce aid or we will stop aid only if you reopen the schools, only if you allow for a political process, only if you stop. That is what we hear, that this will create the right incentives. But that assumes that the Taliban care about what happens to 40 million people. The Taliban have demonstrated that they do not. The priority is members of the Taliban, the fighters, and their livelihoods and their income. And they are at most 100,000, at most, if you're very gracious. What we're seeing now, and the reports we're getting from the inside, is that a lot of the resource capture that is happening, a lot of the senior leadership and middle rank leadership, whatever resources they can get their hands on, they're taking it out of Afghanistan, either to Pakistan to buy assets, or to Dubai, or to the Gulf countries they have access to, because of the fear that this will be lost. So it's important to characterize the recipient of this aid in this conversation. The Taliban do not have a governance mindset. I would like to end with a quote by the Sheikh Hassan, the prime minister of the de facto authorities, last year when the initial pressures and the outcry of the economy was high. And he said that we have been chosen and tasked by God to end the occupation and introduce the Islamic Sharia in the land. The rest is up to God. That means don't come to us for governance, don't come to us for jobs, don't come to us for quality of life. That is not a part of our mandate. And so sending millions of dollars on a weekly basis to a leadership with this mentality cannot be interpreted as anything else but money to get them to push your agenda. And unfortunately, that is the reality that we have to deal with.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Let me continue the conversation. And Ustad Sharani, thank you for the contribution. I think that all of us, every single one of us here, has an obligation to whichever constituency we serve, my university students and colleagues, to the people of Afghanistan, to evaluate the evidence, to make our observations and suggestions based on the evidence, and to interpret it in a transparent way, which can be challenged and improved on. When we come to this issue of aid dependence and understanding what the Taliban are doing, fundamentally, the Taliban are specialists in Bajgiri. So they are extortionists. They are the world's best and most effective extortionists, and they did not militarily defeat the United States. I mean, that's bakwas. It's bakwas. I mean, the US had 12 casualties per year for like the past 5-6 years of the conflict. That was not a military defeat, but there was a policy defeat, and ironically, the area that the Taliban were more successful than the Republic in, alas, was in public finance. Their version of public finance is extortion, Bajgiri. The $2.3 billion per year, approximately, depending on the course movements of exchange rate, that the Taliban get, it is primarily from the Afghan economy, and it is Baj on the Afghan economy. It's not optimal tax rates, and although it can be accounted for, much of it in the same revenue system that operated beforehand. Your colleagues are operating the systems. It is Baj on every legal and illegal activity in the Afghan economy. The percentage contribution of external donors, whether they be Western or Eastern, whether they be our brothers from the Islamic Republic of Iran, who have previously provided operational finance, even some during the Republic era, and no doubt are generous contributors to the Sanduk under the Charpai of His Excellency Amir al-Momineen. That is of course one source, and of course they will find some way of getting Baj from Western assistance, but the vast majority of the 2.3 billion is money they have taken from the Afghan people. And in my suggestion that the Nojawan, the experts here, should be involved in sectoral commissions, they should be a voice for the Afghan people to find out where that money has gone and propose better. But I wanted to finish on this issue which always comes up, on the 40 million weekly or 80 million bi-weekly or 2 billion annually. This is not a contribution to the budget of the Emirate. It does not make any contribution to the 2.3 billion. If you had, of course, there is no shafafiyat. If we had Hisab Kitab here behind us of the 2.3 billion, we'd get from Madaniyat, most of it is from Gumruk. Nowhere will you find any contribution to that budget from the 40 million. The 40 million is a mechanism for providing the liquidity, the dollars cash into the Afghan economy, which is credited to the accounts, not of the Taliban, it is credited to the accounts of the aid actors who are part of the committee operating in New York and are then eligible to receive either dollars credited to their account that, according to the arrangement that they have with their bank, they can draw on it once off or over a period of time, or they can have the equivalent amount of Afghanis credited, for which, as you know, Dr. Saab, there must be a foreign exchange auction that they and that is of course where, of course, it is a contribution to the dollar liquidity. It is something which we know has been one of the contributions to the robustness of the Afghani exchange rate. It does not solely explain it. It does help explain what's happening in the exchange rate. It is not assistance to the Taliban. It is not a contribution to the budget. The budget is coming from the Afghan people. Of course, it is one factor which has meant it has helped stave off one kind of economic crisis, which is currency collapse. But now, of course, as you've explained, Afghanistan is living with another problem, which is the problem of deflation, which, I mean, has its other side effects. But I want it absolutely clear, the United States and the United Nations are not providing assistance to the Taliban through for 40 million, and it is not a sign that somehow it is a support of the emirate, and it is not a sign that they're going to recognize them. We have many other problems, but not that problem. There are many other reasons to criticize the United States and the UN and their failures, but yeah, let's focus on other things. The 40 million has been overused as a sign of supposed Western blessing of the Taliban. Bibakshi.
فقط به قسمت آخر گپ موکل با سوال شروانی صاحب میایم. مسئله 40 میلیون که از درست است، بحث موکل که پیسه از بود مسائل رسمی ملل متحد، از بود آنچه که در اسناد و اوراق نگاشته شده، درست است که برای طالبان سرازیر نمیشه، ولی به صورت غیر مستقیم طالبان همکاری میکنه. منابعی را که من بیشترم کوتاه اشاره کردم، طالبان فروش اسعار خارجی را که از طریق از او ثبات قیمه که هدف اصلی بانک مرکزی است، اگر دسترسی به ذخایر ارزی نداشته باشن چطوری را میتونن مدیریت بکنن؟ بدون شک که پول بر از به دسترسشان قرار میگیره، ولی نه از اینکه پای پول قسمی که ما در گذشته پول میامد از طریق RTF بانک جهانی زیر قیومیت وزارت مالیه بود و در حیثیت پیش بانک مرکزی، ولی آلی پول درست است برای بانک مرکزی نمیره، اما پول برای بانک AIB میره که باز از اون طریق از طریق تسعیر اسعار خارجی یا دلار و افغانی دور میخوره، بازار افکت میکنه. و دیگه ای که قسمت پیشتر من اشاره کردم آقای هبت الله یا که اعلان کرده که پیسه رو نکشین و سر فورن کرنسی یا اسعار خارجی، شرایط سختی را که وضع ساخته این باعث شده که و اقتصاد هم کوچک شده. و در قسمت بحث شرانی صاحب, I think the literature on the aid is evolving, and I'm not an anthropologist, but I can take you to a very good article by Ashimisa was talking about Vietnam case. There is a very good comparison why aid money was a success in Vietnam and why it was not a success in Afghanistan. And the argument is because of the homogeneity of the society. It's very anthropological. In Vietnam, one nation, one society, no differences, no problems, no things as such. Whereas in the context of Afghanistan, so you have all these heterogeneity and of course an escalating war and of course the difficult regional neighbors and actors and those sort of things is causing. And I think there's a lot about aid rentierism, and I don't want to go to the literature because people are just talking about the aid because we have been a recipient of aid. And if we were a natural resources kind of country, then we would have been in a better position, just like Iran, like other Middle East countries. But aid has that cost. Happy or unhappy, it will have that cost. And one final thing, with the ruble, there is a lot of literature emerging. With the Taliban takeover, there's a very dominant literature is emerging with regards to ruble to state transition. And I have learned from many other insurgent groups in Middle Eastern countries that they have been inspired by the Taliban because they say we can take the government when they can.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saib. Thank you, everyone. Well, we can conclude as long as the Taliban are there, it will continue to come with not having any economic system or anything else. Afghans do have to rely on foreign aid, and we do rely, not that we support or that others don't have questions about it. Thank you so much, everyone. We conclude our panel right here. We will take a short break and we'll come back. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. At this time, we'll have our tea break. We'll reconvene at 4:20 sharp. Coming back to the next session, which is one of the most interesting sessions so far.
I'm not sure the number. China. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we have seen success stories in Germany, in Japan, in Korea, maybe a little in Vietnam. But these are bad. I'm not going to go with other parts of America business. And you're buying everything from me.
کانال تلگرام 8 صبح را دنبال کنید. ما تازه ترین رویدادهای خبری افغانستان، منطقه و جهان را به گونه موثق، متوازن و به موقع پوشش می دهیم. برای دسترسی آسان به رویدادهای خبری، گزارش‌ها و تحلیل‌ها کانال 8 صبح را در تلگرام دنبال کنید و به اشتراک بگذارید. کانال واتساپ 8 صبح را دنبال کنید. کانال واتساپ 8 صبح را دنبال کنید. ما تازه‌ترین رویدادهای خبری افغانستان، منطقه و جهان را به گونه موثق، متوازن و به موقع پوشش می‌دهیم. برای دسترسی آسان به رویدادهای خبری، گزارش‌ها و تحلیل‌ها، کانال 8 صبح را در واتساپ دنبال کنید و به اشتراک بگذارید.